don't you think it's weird that they're making this plea deal in Guantanamo Bay with terrorists at the fucking same time that there's this Russian prisoner swap of 24 people?
They tried to get into Marine Corps base Quantico by pretending to be Amazon delivery drivers.
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjakovic. And we are unapologetically outspoken.
Hey everyone, happy Friday. Okay, so we have all kinds of shady deals going on with the Biden administration. So I figured we need to talk about it. Starting with this week on Wednesday, where the Defense Department announced that they reached a plea deal with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Walid Mohammed Salih, Babarak bin Atash. I'm sorry, I'm butchering these names. Mustafa Ahmed Adam al-Hamswami. Anyhow, all of those guys were allegedly the masterminds behind the 9/11 terror attacks. Just let that sink in for a second, because when I first heard this, I'm like, a plea deal with the terrorists behind 9/11? It's 2024. Like, what the hell is going on? So apparently these guys were charged in 2008, then again in 2012, and now in 2024, they're getting a plea deal. So what does the plea deal entail? Well, we don't know. Our government won't tell us. Now, the New York Times reported that the three men will get life sentences, but the death penalty is off the table. So what are we getting in return for taking the death penalty off the table? Again, we don't know. Zero answers from this administration as usual. And obviously, the families of the victims of 9/11 are outraged because they've been waiting over 20 years for an actual trial. And when reporters asked KJP about it, this is what she said.
Who wanted to see a full trial, who wanted to see this kind of come to a fuller process. So look, this is basically what Jake said. This is something that we had no involvement in. He didn't have any involvement in. And so the White House played no role in this process. And the president directed his team to consult as appropriate with officials and lawyers and Department of Defense, obviously. We have said this before. We are, our hearts go out to the families who lost loved ones on that day. The president on 9/11 has honored them every year, and the families who lost their loved one on that terrible day.
So, Tara, do you think that was a good enough answer?
I think it's a classic Biden admin no accountability answer, and also a very classic KJP response. In another clip, she actually just defers responsibility to an entirely different government entity. I think people kept asking questions, and she started getting irritated and just kept.
She looked like she was squirming, like big time.
Yeah. She basically just told reporters, like, look, our hearts go out, but I've got nothing for you. So stop asking me questions. Okay. Like, that was her general demeanor. And you could see it in her body language. If you watch the videos, you can hear the complete lack of interest, lack of sincerity, and lack of compassion in her voice. She doesn't give a fuck. None of them do. Like, fuck the families. These thousands of Americans who were killed by terrorists, fuck their families, fuck the survivors, the firefighters, the cops, the civilian volunteers, the victims, like everyone. People have been experiencing health problems and illnesses ever since 9/11, but fuck them, right? And what's the justification for this decision from the DOD? Well, according to a letter written by the chief prosecutor for military commissions, stated, quote, these three accused have agreed to plead guilty to all of the charged offenses, including the murder of 2,976 people listed in the charge sheet, and to be later sentenced by a panel of military officers. We recognize that the status of the case in general, and this news in particular, will understandably and appropriately elicit intense emotion. We also realize that the decision to enter into a pretrial agreement will be met with mixed reactions among the thousands of family members who lost loved ones. The decision to enter into a pretrial agreement after 12 years of pretrial litigation was not reached lightly. However, it is our collective, reasoned, and good faith judgment that this resolution is the best path to finality and justice in this case, end quote. Like, what the fuck? Like, no, the best path to finality and justice would have been a fucking televised public hanging in Times Square as soon as these fucks were caught 2 decades ago, not letting taxpayers fund their imprisonment for the past 20 years and then negotiating a plea deal. Like, it's literally disgusting. And I want to say, speaking of prison, KJP in the same press conference also made it very clear that one of Biden's top priorities before leaving office is his quote determination, end quote, to close Guantanamo Bay. And that's the prison off the coast of Cuba where these terrorists were housed. But why does he want to close it? Because it takes too long to process inmates, and the negotiation tactics used at the prison are too tough and too torturous. Like, that's exactly what a prison for terrorists should be, fucking tough and torturous. But are we surprised? Like, should we expect anything different from our government at this point? No. This administration does not care about our country. How many times do we need to say that? How many times do we need to provide examples of this fact? This is just another one.
Yeah, no kidding. And I mean, I'm sorry, but you make this plea deal with the people behind the biggest terrorist attack on American soil in our lifetime, and the president knows nothing about it. Like, was completely kept in the dark, according to KJP. Like, there are people that murder one person and get the death penalty. These people killed almost 3,000. And so it's like, I want to know why. Why can't Biden or Kamala tell us anything? Why are they kept in the dark? Who the hell is running our country right now? I think that's crystal clear. It's not Biden and it's not
Yeah.
Kamala Harris. Who the fuck is it?
Yeah, like there's no way, I'm sorry, there's no way they were kept in the dark. Like, I don't believe that for 1 second because I just can't put together how military prosecutors would be negotiating with the three most high-profile terrorists in modern US history without the White House knowing about it. Like, that makes no sense. And in that clip, KJP referenced something that Jake Sullivan said. And so the deniability here is crazy. He said, quote, the president had no role. The vice president had no role. I had no role. The White House had no role. We were informed yesterday, the same day that they went out publicly with this pretrial agreement that had been accepted by the convening authority, end quote. Like, again, I call bullshit. There's just no way that news like this would be allowed to be released to the public without approval or acknowledgement from someone in the White House or whomever is running the country. Because this is not like a case of a reporter breaking a story, right? This was a decision that was made within the Department of Defense. This was not a whistleblower allegation, someone coming forward out of the blue. This was a fucking hearing. Like, I don't buy the bullshit. So let's just say that we live in an alternate universe where they legitimately didn't know anything about it. Even if that was the case, neither Biden nor Kamala had anything to say when this news was released. And I get it with Biden. There's like no point in him saying anything these days because it doesn't matter. He's like out of the picture and nobody cares. But Kamala should have had, this was like a golden opportunity for her to have a press conference, to make a statement. Nothing. And according to the Washington Times, Kamala's campaign said that this was a matter for the White House. And that's her, quote, official side of her political world. Like, of course, right? Why should Kamala be put to the task to answer any questions, give a response? Like, the media continues to just let her slide. She never gets asked any difficult questions. She hasn't done a single press conference since becoming the unelected Democrat nominee. And this is on purpose. Kamala is a puppet, just like Biden, and she cannot give an answer that is off script. I mean, this whole thing is fucking insane.
And I mean, she's pushing it on the White House. She's the fucking vice president
Right.
and the presidential nominee. Like, in what world is this acceptable? But of course, the Democrats aren't going to call her out on it. The media is not going to call her out on it. So she can do whatever she wants. House Speaker Mike Johnson, he's being vocal. He's saying something about it. He posted on X saying, quote, the Biden-Harris administration has done the unthinkable. They've agreed to a plea deal with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of the September 11th attacks, and two of his accomplices. Now, just think about the point that we've gotten to. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris have weaponized the Department of Justice to go after their political opponents, but they're cutting a sweetheart deal with 9/11 terrorists. We need a president who kills terrorists, not negotiates with them, unquote. This administration gives sweetheart deals to terrorists while attacking political opponents. Like he said it perfectly, and everyone can see it. They give illegal migrants free health care, free housing, free food, while American citizens can't even afford to pay their grocery bill or the rent. And they want us to vote for Kamala because, well, she's a woman, yet they refuse to define a woman and have trampled on women's rights over the last 4 years. Like, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm so fucking pissed right now because they do this shit and it's so obvious and it's so horrible and ruthless, but no one calls them out on it.
Well, no one
So,
from their side calls them out on it.
right. Now, Tara, like I've been thinking about this like overnight, okay? And don't you think the timing is a little suspicious that you have this plea deal from the 9/11 terrorist attacks happening right now at the very same time that there's another secret deal happening. So at this same time, the Biden administration made a prisoner swap deal with Russia, where 24 prisoners from 7 countries were released in what Biden called the largest of its kind since the Cold War. All right. Remember the last time this happened? We got basketball player Brittany Griner back, who said she hates America, and in return, we freed the biggest arms dealer in the world, known as the Merchant of Death. Well, this time, out of the 24 freed prisoners, 2 were American citizens held by Moscow on espionage charges. So it was Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, which I think that's the one that Tucker Carlson asked Putin about in that interview. And also former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan, as well as Alsu Kermasheva, a Russian American journalist, and Vladimir Kara-Murza, who is a legal permanent resident of the US. So listen to what Trump posted about the latest prisoner swap. So this was on Truth Social. He posts, quote, so when are they going to release the details of the prisoner swap with Russia? How many people do we get versus them? Are we also paying them cash? Are they giving us cash? Please withdraw that question because I'm sure the answer is no. Are we releasing murderers, killers, or thugs? Just curious because we never make good deals at anything, but especially hostage swaps. Our negotiators are always an embarrassment to us. I got back many hostages and gave the opposing country nothing and never any cash. To do so is a bad precedent for the future. That's the way it should be, or this situation will get worse and worse. They're extorting the United States of America. They're calling the trade complex. That's so nobody can figure out how bad it is. Well, that was the post, okay? And apparently Trump isn't the only one questioning the deal. Even people on the left, including ABC News propaganda machine, is questioning this deal. So ABC News posts this article stating concerns about swapping innocent Americans for Russian criminals and how this can encourage our adversaries to target Americans abroad and detain them as leverage for a prisoner swap. And it's true, like we get these innocent people, these journalists, they got a fucking assassin, an assassin, and like spies. These are like KGB people. So, ABC News contributor Elizabeth Newman, who's a former Homeland Security official, said, quote, are we actually feeding the beast by doing this prisoner swap, making it more likely that they're going to actually go and unlawfully detain more people so they have bargaining chips so that we will in the future release whoever might arrest that is important to Putin. Okay, I think I got that quote wrong. But we get the point, right? Like this is going to encourage them to go after American citizens and unlawfully detain them so that they can get more of their criminals released in the future, right? Like it's crazy. And since when does ABC News critique Biden? They're and like stand with Trump on any issue. Like this is crazy. Both sides are pissed about this.
Yeah, I am surprised by that criticism. And I want to point out something that just came across my feed because I thought this was interesting. And so there were like a total of 24 people involved in this prisoner exchange. And it wasn't just between America and Russia. There were other countries involved. There was like a German citizen, and somehow I guess Belarus was involved because Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko just this morning, he basically said that Biden had nothing to do with this exchange whatsoever. And he said, you saw it happen. The prisoners were released. We were asked to get involved, help in what ways that we could. People who were sentenced for life in the West were freed. And he talked about how, Putin thanked him for the release. And he said, the Belarus president said, of course, someone like the US president will boost his authority with this, even though he had nothing to do with it. Special services carried out the negotiations. Not even diplomats were involved. We had agreed to do this quietly, and diplomats started yelling to the entire world. This should be done quietly. It's people's lives. So I just thought that was interesting because I'm pretty sure Biden had nothing to do with it. But here's what I want to point out. While Biden and Kamala both stayed quiet on the 9/11 decision, they were both on hand to greet the freed Russian prisoners at Joint Base Andrews at 11:40 p.m. last night, which frankly, I don't know how Biden was even awake at that hour, although I have read articles talking about how he looks completely spaced out while he's standing there. But Kamala gave Dershowitz a hug, and Biden said it felt wonderful, and Kamala said it was an extraordinary day. And like, I'm sure for the families, it was. But the lack of transparency about what was involved in the trade, like, that's the fucking problem. And it's like, surprise, surprise, these details haven't been disclosed by the White House.
Well, yeah, and don't you think it's weird that they're making this plea deal in Guantanamo Bay with terrorists at the fucking same time that there's this Russian prisoner swap of 24 people? Like, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to say like there that has to be intertwined somehow. Like that can't just be a coincidence that both of these things are happening at the same time. I don't know. That's just
Yeah.
me.
No, I'm telling you, we're getting set up for some fucking major terrorist activity.
Yeah.
And as we get closer to this election, shit's going to go down. Because while all this was happening the past couple days, it was also revealed that there were two illegal migrant Jordanian nationals, Hassan Hamdan and Mohammed Dabbous. And this was back in May. They tried to get into Marine Corps Base Quantico by pretending to be Amazon delivery drivers. Well, they were just released on bail yesterday and set free, and the Biden admin has been trying to cover it up because all we know at this point was that the incident happened on May 3rd. And Stephanie, I'm going to tell you the details and you tell me if this is shady, okay? So, according to an article in Just the News, these two guys tried to enter the base at 3:23 a.m., okay? Fucking 3:30 in the morning. They're driving a white freight van with Virginia tags, and they claim to be Amazon subcontractors. Yet when they pull up to the gate, they have no ID. And they are being asked questions by the security officials who then start giving them commands. They completely ignore the commands. At one point, the driver hits the gas pedal and tries to drive and ram the vehicle through the entrance, but security was able to set up like a barricade and stop them. And so, what did military police do? They handed them over to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And we hear nothing about this for 3 months, right? So then yesterday, they're charged with mere misdemeanors for trespassing on a military base. They've been released on bail with a promise to appear in Alexandria court in September. Like, what the fuck? First of all, why weren't they deported? Because they're both illegal. Why are they still in the fucking country? And this is reportedly one of many congressional investigations into similar incidents reported at multiple U.S. military installations. And the Biden admin is saying nothing. They would not even release the names of the two men involved. They wouldn't even verify that they were in the country illegally, despite demands from members of Congress and Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin. It wasn't until the Center for Immigration Studies identified them through a search of court records that they were able to identify who they were and confirmed their illegal status.
Okay, let me get my jaw off the floor. I mean, Quantico, everyone knows what it is, right? It's got to be like one of the most secured locations in America. I mean, you could go and try to break into the Amazon warehouse, which is like 5 miles from my house, and you would still be detained in jail. Like you wouldn't just get a misdemeanor, but you can go and try to get into Quantico and you're just let free. Like maybe they were part of Kamala's bail bond thing that she started in California where all those criminals were set free to go and recommit crimes because what the fuck, Tara, like we need to do a full on episode and dig into this because as you were talking I was remembering like months ago, and I don't know if we talked about this or not, but months ago there was something with Chinese immigrants that tried getting into like a military base
Yeah.
and never heard anything else about it. What happened to them? What was that all about? It's like everything's hush hush. And I'm just wondering if this is happening more than we realize, more than the news is reporting. So I'm
Well,
curious. I'm going to dig into it now.
that's why I'm curious because when that article talked about how this is one of many investigations, and again, like I was just making the notes on this, a couple hours before we recorded, so I didn't have time to dive into that. But I think we definitely should because I feel like there's so much they're not telling us, and for them to not even like, how do you not make the names public? How do you not
Right.
give any information to the American people? How does the Biden admin say fucking nothing about it? Like, there's
Yeah.
just too much weird shit going on with illegals and terrorists in our administration right now that there's no fucking way it's all coincidental.
Yeah, I mean, in the last 4 years, we've had close to 300 people on the terrorist watch list that we know of come into the US. I mean, who knows how many that we aren't aware of because there's been like 20 million damn people. Then we're releasing or not releasing, but not giving the guys from 9/11 the death penalty. We're doing a Russian prisoner swamp. People are trying to get onto our military bases. Like, they're definitely hiding shit. And you know what? I would not be surprised if Kamala and Biden are in the dark. I mean, I really don't think that they're running the country right now. I don't think that any of these people that are really in charge are telling them anything because they're fucking idiots. That's my opinion. Don't sue me. Anyhow, um, on top of all of that, there's another shady deal happening with Kamala and the Inflation Reduction Act. And Tara, you're going to love this. So, Republicans held a press conference this week to highlight the shady government spending happening through the Inflation Reduction Act, which is actually funding these radical anti American groups that we see protesting and wreaking havoc across the country who, by the way, are now endorsing Kamala Harris for president and donating to her campaign. Oh my
Yep.
God, you can't make this shit up. So I am going to play a clip from the press conference. Here it is.
Which we have renamed Invest in Radical Activities Act, because that's what this is about. So we've really been digging into who is getting these massive amounts of grants through the EPA. There's $3 billion in the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, that will go for different climate kind of buckets. And in our investigation, we found that a lot of this money that's going out really has little to do with the environment and a lot to do with uh, funding groups that are basically engaged in what I characterize as anti-American activities. They're anti-American, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, anti-police, and anti-border security. So the first one I'm going to go to is, and before I do that, I'm also going to say that Vice President Harris, who is now the nominee for the Democrat presidential race, is quoted here. I have put equity at the center of our nation's largest investment in climate in history to reach the organizations that know their community best. That's what she said when they rolled out and actually named these organizations. And interestingly, today, there was a news article today saying that the green groups have now formed a coalition today. And guess who they're endorsing for president? Vice President Harris.
So,
Shocking.
yeah, let's just sum this up. The Inflation Reduction Act funds actually went to radical leftist groups who we see out there protesting everywhere. And we've called that out for a while, that these people are paid. We just thought it was Soros, exclusively funding them. Now these same groups are backing Kamala for president and they are funding her campaign. So if this is all true, then she is funding them with our taxpayer dollars, and then they turn around and fund her campaign. Like, am I getting this right? Like, I feel like I'm beginning to see where the mysterious millions of dollars for her campaign that she raised in just one day actually came from.
Yeah, I want to read something. Shit, I gotta find it. So, crap.
And I think
Okay.
too, like,
No, go
didn't
ahead.
we talk about this a while back with like the infrastructure bill and they were doing like the same shit? And I don't know if that's part of the Inflation Reduction Act, but I think this has been going on for a while. And this woman, this Republican, I forget her name. Now that Kamala's running, I feel like she is making this her mission to like track the money.
Oh, of course. That's not even remotely shocking. Um, okay, never mind. I was going to read some. Okay, my mom sends me this email, right? And it's like this fucking rabbit trail of how all this shit is connected. And I'm just going to read it because I
Yeah,
think it's
go
kind
for
of
it.
crazy. And I don't know where this came from. It was one of those things that was like sent to my mom and then she sent it out. But we could probably do some digging and find out if this is legit. And so the email was like, it's called One Big Happy Family, right? And it talks about how everyone is connected in this whole
Mhm.
democratic thing. And so, okay, it says the governor of Michigan used to work for George Soros. We also know already Gavin Newsom is Nancy Pelosi's nephew. Adam Schiff's sister is married to one of George Soros's sons. John Kerry's daughter is married to Mullah's son in Iran. Hillary's daughter, Chelsea, is married to George Soros's nephew. ABC News executive producer Ian Cameron is married to Susan Rice, Obama's former national security advisor. CBS President David Rhodes is the brother of Ben Rhodes, Obama's Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategic Communications. ABC correspondent Claire Shipman is married to Jay Carney, former Obama White House press secretary. ABC News and Univision reporter Matthew Jaffe is married to Katie Hogan, Obama's former deputy press secretary. ABC President Ben Sherwood is the brother of Elizabeth Sherwood, Obama's former special advisor. CNN VP Virginia Mosley is married to Tom Needs, former Hillary Clinton's deputy secretary. Now you know why no one's investigated, because they all have their hands in the cookie jar. Remember, James Comey investigated the Clinton email scandal and the Clinton Foundation and made the final decision not to recommend prosecution by the DOJ. Well, it turns out the Clinton Foundation was audited by the law firm DLA Piper. One of the executives there was in charge of the Clinton Foundation audit. Who was it? Peter Comey, James Comey's brother. Peter Comey held an executive position with the Washington law firm that did the audit of the Clinton Foundation in 2015. Peter Comey was officially DLA Piper's senior director of real estate operations for the Americas in 2015 when the Clinton Foundation scandals first broke and Hillary was preparing for her presidential campaign. Not only was DLA Piper, the firm where Comey's brother worked, involved in the audit of the Clinton Foundation, but according to the foundation's donor records, DLA Piper had given between $50 and $100,000 to the foundation. It gets cozier. DLA Piper executive Douglas Emhoff is taking an extended leave of absence from the firm. Who is Douglas Emhoff? Kamala Harris's husband. Coincidence? It only gets worse when it comes to how deep the swamp is. Dominion, the voting machine provider, serves 40% of the US market. It is in 30 states. The state of Texas rejected the machines. Admiral Peter Neffinger is on Biden's transition team. Neffinger was the president of the board of Smartmatic. Smartmatic is another voting machine supplier that entered into an agreement with Dominion in 2009. Smartmatic counted the votes in Venezuela. Smartmatic is connected to Philippine voter fraud. Smartmatic is run by Lord Mark Malloch Brown, who works for George Soros. Brown chairs the board of a number of nonprofit boards, including the Open Society Foundation, the Center for Global Development. Open Society is, of course, owned by George Soros. Smartmatic partnered with DLA Piper Global. Again, Douglas Emhoff works for DLA Piper Global. Douglas Emhoff is Kamala's husband. Guess who owns Dominion? Bloom Capital Partners LP. Guess who's on the board for this? Richard Bloom. Who's Richard Bloom? Dianne Feinstein's husband. Nancy Pelosi's husband is also a major investor. An aide to Nancy Pelosi, Needham Eshami, was hired by Dominion Voting Systems, which is listed on the Clinton Foundation website. Dominion Voting is listed as a $25,000 to $50,000 donor to the Clinton Foundation in 2014. Georgia Governor Kemp used Dominion Voting after Texas and Florida rejected it. Dominion has a lobbyist named Jared Thomas, who was governor and Brian Kemp's chief of staff and press secretary from 2012 to 2015. So if you remember the Feinstein-Kavanaugh-Soros connection, it will help you understand this next bit of information. Deborah Katz, Christine Ford's lawyer, worked for George Soros at the Open Society Foundation. Deborah Katz also worked at Project on Government Oversight, which is funded by George Soros's Open Society Foundation, and is also the co-signer of the letter that Dianne Feinstein presented against Kavanaugh's nomination. Kamala Harris did not prosecute One West Bank for their fraud when she had the authority. Soros owned One West Bank. Now you know why a woman who placed 7th in her own state when running for president is now VP.
Yeah. And just
Holy
think about
shit.
all the decades of money that's gone to these like leftist causes, like climate change, homelessness, poverty, and why it never improves and gets better, because they're all giving each other, it's just like one big money laundering thing. They have all these companies, they're all intertwined, they're paying themselves with our taxpayer money.
Yeah. And it's just like, you look at it all in little bits and pieces, but when I read that whole thing and you just like see it all come together, it's like mind blowing to me. Like we should already know this, but it still was like a what the fuck moment.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Sorry,
that
that
explains
was
a
kinda
lot.
like-
And it explains why everything we're seeing with Kamala is made up. I'm telling you, it's manufactured celebrity status. And there are people that are dumb enough to fall for it, but most of it is just because all the media, like not only are they given a script, they're all related. They're all married to these people. They're all part of the same freaking family. Like this is
It
crazy.
legitimately, yeah, it is the swamp. That's exactly what it is. And now like that reference makes even more sense to me.
Well, that's why they're all afraid of Trump, because he is part of that elite group. He knows all their secrets. He's run around with a lot of these circles for years. And he said that the first time he ran, like, I didn't want to be a part of their club anymore. And they don't like that because I know all their secrets. So, wow, interesting. Okay, well, that's a big thing to end on. We'll just let everyone sit with that and have a great weekend. And we'll see you back here on Monday. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.